Hi, my name is Brad Young, and welcome to the Peak Performance Podcast. Today, I'm going to be giving an update on stem cell treatment and the other peptides and things that I've been taking and experimenting with. Some of the things I'm using for pain, for rehab, for stretching, for getting better and getting more towards peak performance. I utilize peak performance to help myself mentally and physically as I'm aging. It's funny, because when you're younger, you don't think about these things, but as we age, these things become so much more important. How we age. Too many people say just age gracefully. I don't believe that shit. There's no aging gracefully. There's no sense in putting yourself through all that unnecessary pain and trauma and all that unnecessariness for no reason whatsoever. It's not like you're gaining anything by just aging gracefully when you've got so many things that are available now, so many technologies, just like the stem cell treatment that I've got, or your red light therapy, and all these things that I utilize because they're important, because when you think about, peak performance, you think about, being at your peak performance, the best you can be. Everybody's got different levels, but there's tools that are available. And a lot of these, I look at that's, have been in professional athletics for years. Same thing with the mental training. The military's been using the things that I talk about for many years. It's just, it's funny because I look at some of the books that I've written and some of the podcasts and things that I do, and then I see the exact same thing in the mentality of what the military's been doing for their peak performance to help improve their soldiers, in elite military units. And so, throughout the series, we went through peak performance from so many different angles. And so, I want to give an update. I want to talk about what we did and then where we're going, because, there's a long way to go. I'm going to document officially, the things that I'm doing using the protocols and things like that, and then give my improvements throughout the course. Just like I'm going to update today on the stem cell therapy treatment that I received back at the end of June, last day of June, and the progress that's been made from that. And I'm gonna do the same thing with the peptides and everything. And also I'm gonna do all the PT tests and things like that are in the early episodes. Go out, time myself, and then put together even more in-depth plans that I actually put in the original episode. The original episode has training plans, but I'm going to change them up and I'm going to add to them and see how how it affects me and my body, because we all have different body types. It could be a mix between them, but we got to figure out what your body type is and figure out more in-depth things about how you diet, conditioning, stretching, everything affects how you perform, and then mentally, there's I'm say there's the mental side of it is so much. Good example was this morning. I play Willie Nelson when I get into the ice bath, and I get in the ice bath, in the 50s. I don't go down to 45. Just not interested in it at this point. But I listen to Willie Nelson. Normally, I stay 5 minutes, which is one song, and then I get up. And so after that first song, 5 minutes was about it. But then another song come on that I really wanted to listen to, and so I said, you know what? Even though I know I'm going to be colder when I get out, it's going to take longer to warm up, and and I'm going to have some different side effects. I'm going to stay, and I did, and it made me think about when I read Admiral McCraven's book. He talked about being in the muck. They were down in San Diego near the Mexican border, how cold and nasty it was, and all the soldiers, they're freezing. It's getting, light. It's dark. It's getting ready the sun's starting to come up. It's starting to become light, and they started singing to make them forget about how much it sucked, and it come to a reality then, because I was sitting there and I was really cold. I was really cold, but that song come on, and my mind and focus totally changed. And so it shows you what you mentally can do. It wasn't some great achievement. I stayed an extra 5 minutes, but it was still, it showed me how I forgot about being cold and that 5 minutes being over. Because usually when that after that 5 minutes is over and my watch vibrates, I'm up. I'm like, "Ooh, I'm cold. It's time to get up. It's get time to move." I'm focused, my mind's clear, et cetera, et cetera. But that song come on, totally forgot about it. Didn't even I didn't feel cold the rest of the time I was in there. But now when I got up, obviously I was cold. So there's a lot of things mentally we can do to overcome our lack of peak performance. And so we're going to look at that going forward. At first I'm going to give an update, and then we'll start looking at some of the episodes, and then I've got to add some guides to some of the recent episodes. I'm going to add guides to them. I'm also going to utilize these techniques and document and show what it does for me, just like I'm a test dummy, or whatever, I'm a guinea pig, whatever you want to call it, to peak performance, to try. And so hold on just 1 second. When I talk too long, my mouth gets dry, and I've been talking way too long already today. I've made a couple episodes, and they went well. But now I'm going to update you on the stem cell therapy. And so I had it done in my right knee and my left shoulder. Right knee was a injury. I mean, I fell in Dallas, Texas on a bird scooter and cut my patella, like cut it, not just a little, and it was cut, and it reattached. And so it reattached up on the kneecap, and you could feel how thin it was. And then on top of that, I had got hit, I don't know, a couple of years ago by an automobile. Some jackass was looking at their phone and then stop at the stop sign. And I had to, vault myself over the vehicle. I mean, I could feel the weight of it. If I was not spry and in really good shape, I mean, I would have gotten hurt really badly. I mean, I threw myself over the vehicle, and, it was a mid-sized SUV. And so I'm running, and I mean, it was right on me. And so you could just feel it. But I sprung myself over. But then again, I landed on that right knee hard in an odd position. But with the adrenaline and the anger coming out, I had to go. I couldn't sit down and, get looked at, call an ambulance or anything like that, even though I probably should have. Now that I know what I know. But again, they would have wanted to use traditional medicine versus regenerative medicine. And that's why, I'm really big on stem cell therapy. So that's how the right knee was hurt. And, before I got the treatment done, I would run, and then I would go work legs. The inside of my knee would really hurt, and so I was doing cryotherapy with a local studio. They had their cryotherapy machine, and it was really making a difference. It was helping. Now their customer services went down, and I wouldn't go to the new facility if it was free now. But the cryotherapy itself helped, and one day I'd like to own a machine, because along with the ice bath, it really made a big difference, on the swelling on the inside of that knee. But I knew there was damage in there. And, we didn't know until I got down to Mexico to the facility, how bad it was. And, I went to a very, very highly rated facility that, famous podcasters and fighters, they all go to. I mean, it's a very good facility. It's not cheap by any stretch, but it's good. So I had the knee issue. And so top of that, labrum, left labrum, I tore back years ago in a slap tear. I didn't get surgery. I didn't want them cutting in my shoulder, because there, so many problems of everybody that I talked to had serious problems, with any time you start getting cut on your shoulders. And, just like I talked to a guy recently that has worked out for decades. I've seen him in the gym, and he said he'll never be able to bench press again or do a lot of the same things, because he went to the best shoulder surgeon he could find, but it's still going to be a very long recovery for him. And, I talked to him a little bit about regenerative medicine, but I hadn't had it done yet. So there wasn't that much I could really say. I just acknowledged it and just went on. I told him I'm getting stem cell therapy. I'm hoping that's going to help. And he seemed to not understand that it's proven to regrow, you know, ligaments, cartilage, everything that I've went through, in these episodes. It's proven to do this at a really promising rate. And it's where the shoulder is. I mean, it was torn, hurt when I was, flying. I used to fly out quite a bit. Still do some. I mean, I need to fly more. I need to be going more places. But anyway, I'm, making a lot of podcasts. I need to be centralized some of the time. But but it was pain. I mean, especially when when traveling, because you're dragging luggage, you're off balance, everything, things happen. I'm wider than the seats are, and so my shoulders are literally wider than the seats. And so, I had to make sure to get an aisle seat because it was misery if I'm ever in the middle seat. And so, sometimes you need to pay that extra money to sit on the outside or to sit in, business class, because it's worth it from the pain, level of pain. When I flew out to go get this work done, I mean, I was in serious pain because I couldn't take any anti-inflammatory medications or anything for like 2 weeks. I mean, couldn't eat anything anti-inflammatory, etc. For weeks before I flew out. So it was really, that shoulder was really hurting on the way out. I mean, it was really hurting my shoulder, my neck, everything. There was a lot of pain. And so as I'm heading out there, I realize, how much pain that shoulder really has been in. I also, on top of the labrum, I got sideswiped by an automobile that hurt my neck some, so I had to do a lot of rehab with that, and that the rehab had helped. But I knew there was an underlying problem because it didn't heal after all the rehab work. And so, you got your shoulder and you're trapped. It's hurting and pain all the time. Couldn't sleep on my left side. If I ever rolled over on that arm, I mean, it would be a nightmare for days and days. And sometimes, at times I would get frozen shoulder, and my chiropractor, he's fantastic. He would help me work through some of it because he does ARTs, very good. And just a great guy too. I mean, just a great person. I mean, you don't find them that many that are as personable and as good as he is. And he's very good, very knowledgeable in sports medicine. And his wife, she's very knowledgeable as well. So it's always nice to go talk to him. And they were very interested in the stem cell treatments as well, because they're very familiar with it. And so you got left shoulder, been problems for years. I had to avoid certain things to be able to keep from inflaming it and hurting and making it worse. I had to learn how to work around things for a lot of years. And I mean, a lot of pain. And I'm used to pain, but I mean, those are significant pain. So, I went to, a very, very good place. I mean, world-class place to get this done. And obviously, they took a lot of blood, and it was very painful. And I've talked about it before. I mean, I was in a lot of pain for a long time after it. I didn't even know I was going to have to be in a wheelchair until I got down there. And I was going to have to be in a wheelchair for a few days. And so that made my flight and everything a lot different. It made it to where, with your right leg, you can't drive an automobile. You don't think about that until you're there. They didn't warn me on that side of it. And so, just was not prepared in certain ways. And so, there was significant pain throughout the process of things regenerating and growing. When you're regenerating things inside your knee, I promise you, it hurts. It hurts. When my MCL was regenerating, I talked to my chiropractor about we looked at it, and I'm like, I said, man, this is really hurting. He's like, yeah, yes, that's that regrowing. It's still regrowing, because it regrows for, it keeps growing and working, for, weeks and months later after the procedure. If you take care of yourself and you take the right, you don't take the anti-inflammatories and things like that, it keeps growing and getting better. And, obviously I talk with a physician every 90 days now about how it's going. But, it was very painful. The shoulder ended up with frozen shoulder. And I've talked about that, about having, the things that I've had to utilize to get through that, because I couldn't move it, because we didn't know how bad it was until we got down there, because old MRIs are not going to show current damage. Your level of damage goes up. And so we had an idea, but, it ended up being more significant than we realized until we got down there. But, the physician and the organization are really good. And he said, I'm going to fix this. And so he's keeping up big time, especially on the knee because of, the heavy lift that I've always been able to do in my legs. And, I am going to work up and try to attempt to, break the world record for the leg press. I think I'm certain I can do it. And that's part of the update today is I'm finally getting back to that level. And so yesterday, I went in to work legs. And I'll just give it. Here's what I did. I'll just read it right off of my phone. And like I said, I've got to do a better job of documenting these things with, video, etc. But I am as I just start doing it. So, obviously, there's a light run to get started. They get warmed up, stretched out, get all that. And so then I want to do the leg press. And so for the leg press, my warm up, because keep in mind, I mean, my legs have always been really, really strong. I never realized how strong they were. I had no idea. It's one of those weird things that you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And I didn't realize even when I was 155 pounds, 18 years old, I mean, my leg press was way, way above elite already. And I had no idea. You know, if I had kids or anything, I would know that going forward. I've got relatives and young ones that may, be able to understand that better. But I just had no idea. I've always been strong on that in the dips, but never thought about how strong it, really is. And so my knee, I've been scared to do anything with it, in all honesty. I did about a month ago, I went through and I worked out and I gave you guys an update. And I ended up, I was tired. I felt tired. I worked my way up to the 870 pounds, which is just 16 plates plus the 150 on the leg press. It could be 120. I could be a few pounds off, but it really doesn't matter. It's a decent amount of weight. It's 16 plates. And so I'd only got to like 60. It's 55 or 60. I have to look at the record, but it wasn't that much. And I felt tired around 25 or 30 reps. But prior to that, I was doing the same weight after a 3-mile run with a weighted vest or just a regular run. I was doing that weight 75 times. And so I was disappointed. I only got into the 50s. I might have got to 60. I have to go back and look at the last one, but it was disappointing to me. The average person can't even get close to that. But yesterday, after the run, I warmed up. I did 510 pounds 10 times, warming up. And so that's my warm up because I can't even feel lower weights. That's just the way that it is. I just can't even really feel the lower weights that much. And then I went to 690 and I did that 10 times. Then I went to 870 and I got it 70 times. And so I'm almost back to the strength of my pre-stem cell. I had it done. And so I had to obviously shut down in July. And I really didn't even work my legs very hard outside of some running things for a good while. I was scared to do anything when I did it the last time. Like so when I did the heavier leg press the last time, I was scared. I really was. I was in the sauna. I was told a guy, I said, I'm scared to go out here and do this. I don't know what's going to happen. I've spent all this time and money and effort on this knee, and I sure hope nothing's wrong with it. And there was no pain, and just like yesterday, no pain. So I went ahead and did leg extensions, leg curls. I did my normal 500-pound calf raises 50 times, did hack squats, light stiff-legged deadlifts, and then back extensions. So it wasn't just that fantastic of a workout, but when you take the 870 and you look at the 1 rep max calculator, so I'm going to figure this real quick. So 870 pounds. And we could even get lower. Whatever you do, 870 pounds, 70 times. Your estimated one rep max is 2,900 pounds. 2755, you should be able to do twice. So, that's far beyond elite. That's in there is, there's really no percentages above that. Is the world record's not even close to that. So, anyway, it was good. It didn't hurt. It felt stable. But one of the weird things that's happened during my having the stem cells done, which, there's controversy with it with different places, but I really don't care. I'm not concerned about what anybody thinks. I never have been. I mean, it's just not important because everybody's got a right to their opinion, but I just don't care what that opinion is in 99.9% of cases because it doesn't matter. You got to do what's right for you. If you do something wrong, you figure it out. You either, you'll learn something. That's the whole thing about you'll learn. You make a mistake, you learn. Just like with the shoulder, it took longer to recover. I should have been doing more physical therapy, things like that. But the one thing with the knee is when you regrow, your cartilage and everything inside of your knee, all the components, when it starts regrowing all that, the mind-body connection, it's different. It's strange. It doesn't feel right because your body's not accustomed to it. The day that I first started running, when I was allowed to get back to running, I went on a run. I'd been resting for over 30 days, stretched out, and I went run, and my knee felt weird. My shoulder hurt really badly. The front ligaments were still regenerating. As far as for the deltoid right there, top of your shoulder, it was still regenerating. So there was significant. It was really hurting. It was hard, a lot of pain. And so I said, I'm just not going to run that far. Well, I ran a roughly a 25-minute 5K, which is not slow at all, but I didn't mean to. I just was out just trying to pace and see how I was going to do. And what happened, I was planning on running like a 30-minute. I was trying to do a slow one, but my pace got up because I was trying to figure out the knee and how how everything, balanced out. And what I figured out is that knee had got a lot weaker over the rest period. Obviously, it got weaker. The mind body connection wasn't where it needed to be. And so I was pulling harder with my left leg versus my right. So my left leg's my lead leg anyway. I'm left-handed. But as I was striking, that other side was dominating. And so I speeded up more than I realized because I thought I was I was at a reasonable pace, but I did that based on not understanding the mind body connection as well to where that was missing. It's like with the shoulders, the same thing. You've got instability and things like that you're just not accustomed to having because it hasn't been there. Just like that MCL's not been there for a long time. It's been torn, problems in my knee. So it wasn't there. And so, I ran through that and, did pretty decent. I felt pretty good about it. I'm like, okay, 3.2 miles, 25 minutes. I mean, hadn't got up. I hadn't moved out of the bed hardly for a month. I just couldn't do much of anything. I was on one leg, barely, I walked the dog some, but just couldn't do very much and I had to be careful with the dog because of the shoulder. Then I got back and I said, well, let's see how many push-ups I can do. And that shoulder was still bothering me. And after running, I got 100 push-ups. Really, it was probably about 95 or so because I cheated probably on the last few just to try to finish out. But what I realized is the stem cells had already strengthened up those joints quite a bit. There was pain and instability around. I mean, quite a bit of it. I mean, there's a lot of instability, and so you got to figure out how to overcome some of these things. It's like one of the main things that I like to do when I work out. I like to do dips. I do body dips and I do weighted dips. Well, one of the first things there were as the push-up was fine, where it regenerated tissue inside of my shoulder and the back of the shoulder and underneath it where the labrum is. There's where some problems were. And so I'd end up getting some deep tissue massage therapy, and I'm still doing it. I got to get one booked for this week as well. But what it is I get on the parallel bars, and it feels like something's not right, like something's missing, something's pushing, something's not letting you get that full range of motion. And also, it was shaking a lot. Part of it was weakness, but part of it was mind body, because that tissue wasn't there. It had been gone for so many years. Things like that, it had been degenerated so badly. He wasn't used to it, so there was a lot of shaking. And so I've noticed that, the whole time, with the knee and the shoulder, there was shaking. It just was unstable. But I started doing dips, and I could barely do them. And I got to think, before I left, I could do 100 plus dips, and I weighed 210 pounds. And I put 90 pounds on me because we don't have the hundreds anymore. We used to have like 100-pound weight, and that got me free tickets when the WWE guys come in, because they couldn't believe how many reps I could do, with 100 pounds on my waist, with the chain dips. But and that's been many years ago. But before I left, I got up to I was doing 35 reps, good reps, at with 90 pounds on my waist. And I didn't know this till the other day when I looked at the world record on it, but the world record is only 434 pounds, including your body weight. And so let's say I was doing 300 pounds, roughly. I was doing it 35 times. Well, those dips, and they're good. That put my one rep max around 650. 617 pounds for two, supposedly. Now, that's just what the calculator says. I don't mean it's correct. So that means I could definitely compete for it. But as I've been getting back and getting better, and trying to work that up, because with the instability, the thing of it is when your shoulder, you tear things, and these things are regrown. There's a lot of instability in there. There's a lot of unknowns. There's nerves. There's things that are regenerating, growing. And I was telling someone about this in the academy the day, guy that worked there, and he had shoulder surgery done years ago, before we had the opportunities with the peak performance processes and technologies and all the things that were widely available. And we talked about it, and I was telling him about this. I said, I just couldn't believe the differences. And he said that he had way less motion in his shoulder than I do now. But the thing of it is I've had to keep going through all this. I get ART done by the chiropractor. I get deep tissue massages. I stretch every day. I try to stretch every day. I'm going to stretch here in a few minutes before I run, and I'm going to run and go do a light workout. And I've got to get it booked to get the deep tissue. But the shoulder, it's taken more time than the knee, even though I've been scared of the knee, because of the shoulder got frozen, because of the amount of time that it didn't get moved like it needed to be, stretching, etc. And years of damage, because it's all healing. But what I did find out is I could, work on and attempt the world record for the dip as well, because it's only 434 pounds, including your body weight. I definitely can do that. I had no idea. So you don't know what you don't know sometimes. And so these things that we don't know about ourselves, we have to figure, we got to figure them out. And I never really even took it seriously until I got to making podcasts, and having more time to be able to focus on these things like I need to, focus on peak performance. And once I started focusing on that, everything changed. I realized a lot of things, but we don't realize what we have. And a lot of times it's too late, because I am 47 years old, almost 48. And, it's, life goes by quickly, it goes by real quickly, but, we have to step back and look at these things. And so my motion on my shoulder overhead is good. There's no popping. So I'm still working a little bit on the frozen side of it. The, the rotation, all sides is good. Still have a little bit of trouble with the angel walls, because you have to, put yourself against your back against the wall and touch everything. But I can get close if I stretch and I work on it. I get really close with that arm. I still, lacking a little rotation, but the ART therapy is really making a difference, and the deep tissue massage and the stretching. But overall, I couldn't be more pleased. I mean, like I said, I mean, I get scared like of the knee. I'm more worried about the knee than the shoulder for some reason, but I was scared of the knee. But then, I put the shoulder through a lot. And so, but I have built myself back up on those dips too. I guess I need to finish that before we start looking at the other stuff. So on the dips, I tried the 90 pounds, but I could only get it like 20, 25 times. As I would, because of the instability of the shoulder, it was like just didn't feel right. Like there's something in there that's stopping me from moving. And so what it is, I went down to 45s. And so the last two times I've went through and did weighted dips, with the chain, they have the chain up there, which I have one at my home gym as well. But I put 45 pounds on there, and now I weigh 215 versus 210. And I'll talk about that next. I'm going to talk about the Sarah Mullen. But I went through, I don't know, a week or two ago, and I got like 50 something, 55, something like that. With the 45, which is good. I'm 215 plus 45 pounds. And so I come through a couple days ago, and I got it 65 times. And so, 215 plus 45, gonna be 260. So 260 pounds. I'm 65 times. We're getting there. I'm gonna up the weight as as I continue to get better, but I'm not in a hurry to do it because I focus more on strong movements, but with endurance. I do heavy weights, but I do a lot of reps. I do different. I mean, when as we go back and we look at all the different bodybuilding programs and theories and things like that, it'd be like I love Mike Mintzer's heavy duty program. It's very similar to what I did for years, with the simple difference is I do heavier weights at max reps towards the end versus he does, his theory was, 6 to 10 reps max, with all your, with all your weight. But I'd have to do so much weight to do that. I feel like it would make me more injury prone when we're looking at it from that standpoint. It looked like I'd be more injury prone to try to do that much weight because, like let's say we were looking at bench press. I mean, I do 225. I can do it probably, I don't know, 30 times or more. So that means I'd have to go way up to be able to get down into that range, and it'd be heavy weight that I would have to, I would have to have spotters and things, things like that I don't have a lot of times. So you have to be careful. I like the way he does it, the high intensity, and I follow that. I mean, I do everything back to back because, it builds strength and endurance, and I run in between every round, and, it builds, it builds all those things up. Because it keeps you lean and strong. But everybody's got their own opinion, and we'll go through all the theories and stuff again, and we're going to implement them. And I'm going to work through some of the different programs. Is our next, after this month, as I'm completely healed up, as our next podcast, because it's really important, to look at all these things. And so the next thing I'm going to talk about is the Sarah Mullen peptide. And I started taking Sarah Mullen right before I had the stem cells. And so probably a few weeks before I did that, I knew I was going to need something to help me recover. It's going to, improve my natural growth hormone secretion, et cetera, et cetera. And, I went through, what Sarah Mullen does, and my results have been amazing. I've got to go through and document everything, but it's been very good. My sleep has improved significantly. That means my recovery is better. And it allows me, when you get better sleep, my diet becomes better. You don't have those cravings, your cortisol lowers, all these things improve when we get better rest. And so that was the main focus of it, was to get better rest. But what happened is I laid around for that month and didn't do much while I was recovering. What it is, everything healed up. I'd been overtraining for so long and not sleeping quite enough, and just really, overdoing it. Have you seen my workouts before? All this, they were just insane. I mean, there was a lot of volume. I mean, just a ton of running, a lot of strength. I mean, everything hybrid because, I sure don't want to be big, but I don't want to be weak. I'm not going to go out and sprint, but I want to be fast enough to run. I want to be able to, to run, to do hybrid, to do distance, but still be able to, to run. And so, you know, before back about 2 years ago, I was doing sprints. Just a long story short, I was doing sprints and I was talking to my friend about it. I said, man, I keep pulling my hamstring. I said, every time I really hammer into those sprints, I was like, I'm getting older, but I mean, it shouldn't pull like this. There's something, I don't know what's going on. I've got to stretch more, do more and everything. And so, well, what happened is I have a watch that monitors my speed. I'd never checked it or paid attention to it. And so when I did sprints the next time, when I healed up, I felt better. And I felt a little slight pull. I felt it and I slowed down immediately. And what I figured out is when I looked at it, I had not even kicked in to my fastest point, and I was already at almost 17 miles an hour. So that means when I was pulling them most of the time, I was close to, still running around 20 miles an hour at 47 years old. And I'm not a sprinter. I haven't sprinted much in years, but I would just implement it in there. And so then I checked it, running a quarter mile. I run a quarter mile and I was averaging 16 miles an hour running it, but not sprinting, just not all the way out sprinting. So what was happening when I get into all out sprint, as soon as I would hit that speed, just like an old car, I was I was tearing something up. It was impressive to think about, what my speed was years ago, because I'm this fast at 210 pounds at 47 years old. I mean, what was my 155-pound speed? So, you have to think about those things, but the point of it, of all that is I'm the ceramolin helps you, in recovery, and the place that I buy it from, the compounds it for me, they had some bad reviews. And so when I first bought it, I was very scared. I started reading the reviews and I was like, man, what's going on with this? So there's all these bad reviews about not delivering on time. This, just all these, people just having meltdowns. And so I give a bad review as well, because after a week I didn't have it. I'm like, man, something's not right here. Well, I just wasn't right. And the company were wrong too. What they did is they set expectations of, having it in like 3 or 4 days. But the reality of it is you can't compound and have those things out that quickly. But on top of that, the carrier, they'd sent it overnight, 2-day air, second day air. And the carrier, it made it into 6+ days. And so it's the carrier's fault just as much as their expectations. So I went and I changed it and I made episodes about it. And they sent me, 6 months for free. And so I thought that was great. They sent me 6 months for free, and I'm going to talk about them as I get further, into more podcasts, on ceramolin, as I'm giving the updates, that I'll talk about them, because I mean, the product has been good. It's been effective. You put it on your tongue at night, roughly an hour or so, somewhere before you go to bed. Make sure you don't eat anything. Sleep well. You don't even, you don't notice it, but it helps you heal up significantly. And so I've gained weight. Like I said, I mean, I'm like 215, 216-ish, but it's put on good weight. It's muscle weight. My body fats went down because when I went to the clinic to get my blood checked and everything a few weeks ago, that's the one thing, that first thing said, I said, wow, you've gained weight, but your fats went down, because the time I'd went before, I was at 205. But I gain weight when I'm running. So my legs get bigger when I run more. People run to lose weight, but it doesn't do it. It has the opposite effect. So I'll go from 205 to 210, 211 from running, because I gain that much weight in my legs. It's just, just how my genetics work. So I gain weight. And so when I went in, I weighed, 216, 270, I can't remember, 215 or whatever. And I'm like, well, I'm recovering from, stem cells, et cetera, et cetera. And they're like, well, your body fat has went down a little bit. It's went down and you've gained quite a bit of muscle. Okay. So I know it's working. And so I've noticed, some really good things, with the ceremolins. I really, you know, I really like it, and it's helped, and I think it's going to help continue, help me improve naturally without doing other things, But we're going to try the things that we've been talking about. We're going to go through and document them. And so, like, I talked to, we looked at SARMs in episode 62 and other, performance enhancing products. And I'm going to try those SARMs. I've never tried SARMs. I took TRT, testosterone, and then back years ago, obviously, like a lot of people do, we experimented with different steroid cycles and things like that, many years ago. But, there's a difference, in taking steroid. You can tell if I'm taking, so you can really tell it because you can look at me and you can tell. Everything's more cut up. I look different. You can just tell it versus TRT, which just keeps it normal. There's a big difference. A lot of people don't realize the difference. There's a big difference. But we're also going to look at, episode 61, train, eat, and live like Mongol warriors. We're going to go through that. We're going to break down these elite military units and, look at what makes them successful. And I'm going to implement some of these things. We're going to document it, to where I did the research and looked at it and implemented. Some of it we're going to go back and we're going to do, do it to a different level. We're going to look at mental toughness with virtual reality. There's a lot of elite soldiers that use VR for mental toughness. And so, I had an entire episode about that. It's going to make a difference, just trying the VR and seeing how it works on my performance and see what I can, what I can get out of it. We're going to look at all the peptides. So I'm going to, take it. I'm going to do separately. I'm going to do different cycles of peptides and see if they're good at for fat loss, muscle building, longevity, all these different things, because I have taken peptides before. And one actually, regrew my hair. It was funny. But I couldn't hardly take it because it gave me a head rush and it would scare me. But it was a good peptide. And what had happened, I had a CPAP machine and the mask was rubbing the hair off of my head, like around I was like rubbing it. It was rubbing it so hard. And I was in St. Louis and we did a picture before we went out in St. Louis with some of my customers, and there was a mirror behind us, and I was missing some hair, and so I was like, "Oh no!" And so this was a growth hormone producing peptide, and so it was supposed to be good for all of that. So I tried it, and within a few weeks, it grew it back. Like literally grew every bit of it back. So it was wild because I wasn't expecting those kind of results, and so we'll look at the different ones. We've already broke them down. And I'll tell you, how my experience is, and we'll look at all these things. Obviously we talked about stem cells. We're going to look at oxygen therapy. Going to go back through that and all the the military performance standards. We're going to go through all those. We're going to try them. We're going to try the new ones. Try the because the Army changed theirs up, and it's it's a lot different. And so we'll try that. I have a sled. I have everything set up to be able to do it. I have a medicine ball, etc. We're going to go through the different ones for the Marine Corps, Army, and all the branches. Go through that. Look at some of the special operations. See how we measure up to their standards as far as the physical fitness standards, and give you something to try as well to see where where you actually stand, and then look at our program to improve those specific things, because there's a lot of ways to improve ourselves in those, for those events. A lot of them we don't think about because we're not thinking outside of the box. You try just the same normal things, but it's looking outside of the box. That's what's going to make the difference, because you can't put too much strain on certain muscles, certain group. you got to think about, how to actively use everything to improve yourself without overtraining, hurting yourself, causing, problems. And so that's what we're going to look at. We're going to, look at, peak performance. We're going to look at cognitive enhancement with new nootropics. I'm going to go through, I'm going to take some of them and I'm going to, document it now, document my results from it because I've did the research, but I'm going to talk about my results. We're going to look at hypertrophy versus strength and how you can optimize your training based on your body type. We're going to look at cryotherapy. We're going to look at, red light therapy, all these things. And but it's going to be more documented. So I'm going to give you my results because, I've spent the time doing it and and see how it affects my body. We'll look at body fat percentage. We're going to look at all these things, strength, etc. Because, I'm pretty much back where I need to be. I mean, like I said, I got 870 times yesterday, which is almost back. 75 times was, the most I had done after a run. So we're getting there. So, as we're getting there, it's time to look at these things. I'm going to be a little slower for a lot of the runs than these soldiers are, but I've got, but I'm going to implement the techniques and we'll talk about it. I'm going to, document the techniques to improve your speed, the different types of training to do to where you're not overtraining because, years ago, I used to help the Marine Corps recruiters, help them, get people ready. I used to help, I did a lot of stuff with them. And, I got to help with, clean things out of them, but also with the physical fitness, mental standards, things like that. And what I learned from those guys is, everything's always going to be wrong. People got to understand that when they're going in. Understand everything's going to be wrong. They're going to mess with you for something. They're going to find some reason to pick on you because they're going to try to break you down to build you up. And so people didn't need to go in at super peak performance level because if you're too good, you're going to stand out too much and you're going to be, they may not see you as coachable. And so we would work with them to get them to where they meet the standards, but not go overboard, work on that to get a good foundation. That's what we'll do. We're going to look at, see where I'm at versus the standard. We're going to look at for my age and then versus someone younger, and looking, and understand those things. We're going to go through all these things. Like I said, I've got to get the videos and stuff together. I really want to document these things with video. I've got to get people to do these things so I can do it better. But because we want to see how that progress goes because the Marines have got one of the highest bars on the run, so that's going to be one that I don't know that I'm going to be able to make because their max I think is 18 minutes for an 18-year-old for 3 miles. Yeah, good luck. I mean that's pretty fast. I mean unless you're that's elite level, and so but we're gonna work on it. For my age, it's 30 minutes, which I can definitely do, but we'll look at the younger one. I'm gonna, work on the speed, but also like with the Army, they've got new things like pushing the sled, you're pulling sleds, you're doing farmers carries, you're doing all these different things. You're doing a different type of pull up. We went over that, but we'll go over that again and look how we can train to achieve these things. So, basically, what I've laid out initially is the theory and some plans to get better. Did the research, work through it, but now it's time to implement these things, show them in action, look at the timing in between them and really push to get to that next level. Because, like I said, I learned a lot from those guys years ago because I would help them get their ASVAB stuff together. And then we would work on, your running, all your pull-ups, but more than anything, it was more about physical endurance. It really didn't matter what you were doing as long as you were moving and pushing to get to that, to get to the next level. Because once you push yourself so hard, you're going to make it. You're going to do a lot better. And we have, quite a few people that did really well in their class. I mean, really, really well. Several number one people that were, number one in their class all those years ago. But it's because, you worked and built a foundation and worked up. And that's what we'll do with these. We're going to build a foundation, put a plan together, but it's going to be some out of the box things. It'll be things that, that you might not normally think about, because there's more than one way to improve your push-up score. There's more than one way to improve your pull-up score. There's a more than one way to do so many things. And so we got to remember that and work on it. Just like I'm trying to improve my weighted pull-ups. Okay. I can't do that many weighted pull-ups. Okay. I can do tons and tons and tons of weighted dips. Like it's nobody's business, but pull-ups was something that I used to suck at really bad. I really sucked at pull-ups. But I worked and worked on them, and I made them an emphasis to where, at one point I was getting 40 pull-ups, 40 good pull-ups. I mean, when I was down a few years ago, even when I was down in the Caribbean, we were at Aruba, and I could still do, after days and days of not being a peak performer, but just having fun and goofing around, I could still do 40 pull-ups at that point off the pool house roof. It was the roof. I did 40 pull-ups off of that. So I got that, but now, and I worked, and it's harder to get those weighted pull-ups. And so I'm working to improve them. I'm going to work on muscle ups. And those are things that we're going to look at as well. We're going to look at how we're going to do it. It's funny because I did muscle ups before people knew what muscle ups were. Back in the old days of Gold's Gym, back many moons ago, I was doing pull-ups one day and decided to sling up, and I'm like, I'm really good at dips. Let me do it. And I figured a way to sling it up. But now it's a lot harder. I've gotten older, I'm heavier, and I have to figure out a way to do it and do it right, because what I was doing wasn't right. It was a slower version. It wasn't right. So I want to work on those, and I'm going to work on those weighted pull-ups. And the first thing I did the other day is when I got to my max, I pulled myself up for that last one, and I just held it for 30 seconds. And I started lowering myself. I'm doing the whole negative side of it. And that's what I'm going to do as I over the next few weeks, is getting better at it, is working on those negatives. Because once you work on the negatives, you're able to pull the positive. We'll look at those theories. There's a lot of theories that we're going to get to. I mean, like I said, this hasn't been the most technical episode. It's not even remotely close to being one. It's just more of a free speaking one, looking and updating and, kind of looking at where we're headed to, because the main thing is, we need to head in the right direction of peak performance. So I'm going to try these things out and document and demonstrate what it's done for me. It's just like with the red light therapy. I can do the red light therapy, and I swear to you, the next day, if I do it on my face and head, I can tell a difference the next day in the level of oil in my skin and how I feel and look. And the same thing with recovery. I'm gonna purchase a red light blanket. We're going to see how that works on the recovery, because the red light works in so many ways. I did episodes on so many things, and so we're going to go through and implement these things, show results, and I'm going to put links to where you can purchase these items as well. They'll be in the documents, and just continue to work and grow and get better and achieve peak performance. And I guess that's it. But this is really wanted to update on how the stem cell treatments are going, and I couldn't be more pleased. And I'm so glad that I went and got it done. The pain sucked, but it was, at the end of the day, it's worth it. Because I didn't let somebody cut on me. I'm not going to be sitting around for months and months and months. I'm working through the physical therapy part of it and going, because, and like I said, I ended up with frozen shoulder, but, that's just part of it with the inflammation, and I had to work through it. But you learn a lot about yourself when you start really documenting and putting these things down. It's like writing things down. If you take and you write things down, you think about them so much better. I see people all the time, they go around, they talk and speak about a lot of things that they don't know about. They had to take a test, they couldn't pass it, but they memorize things. They hear things and memorize them. But if they would ever write them down, you realize that you may not know as much as you think, and you need to go on and you need to research and experiment more. And that's what I'm going to do, is continue to grow and learn. I'm going to write more books on this. I'm going to continue to, achieve that peak performance, because, there's no sense in aging gracefully when you can age and thrive and be better. It's all about your mindset. A couple gray hairs doesn't make you old. What makes you old is not stretching. It's not doing anything. It's sitting around. It's not being active. It's not eating right. When you're not eating right, it just floods your whole body with just junk, and it makes it very hard to process anything and do it right. You know, so people don't realize that you can be young and be old already. You can be older and be healthy and vibrant, but it takes sacrifice. I mean, you knew about all the shakes and things that I drink, all the things I put in them, and things that I do. I mean, it makes a difference in my life, and that's why I do it. I'm not trying to fight aging as much as I'm just trying to not have pain, not be hurting, be active, vibrant, not to slow down too much. Too many people slow down too quickly. They think they need to retire after they're 30, basically, as far as from doing, I mean, yeah, much athletics, and too many people are not active enough anyway. And so, you got to keep moving. I mean, some of the people that I see now, I mean, they're in their 40s and 50s, and they're achieving and growing more and more. But as a young person, you don't think about it as much, but there's more information now to help be able to grow and achieve peak performance mentally and physically. And that's why we're going through the mental aspects of it. We're looking at the nootropics. We're looking at all these things, and now we're going to start testing them out on myself. And then, if anybody wants to join them, we can, look at it. We can do podcasts together. We get the products together, do podcast, talk about it, and look at experience as well. So if anybody wants to do that, just let me know. I get emails, crazy amount of emails to people wanting to come on this show and other ones. So, reach out, just let me know. But my name's Brad Young. This has been the Peak Performance Podcast. Have a great day, and just keep working hard.